So, let me start with the story. Many years ago when I was teaching in Dubai, I got a phone call from one of my students. And she told me, sir, my daughter's sick today, and so I'm just wondering if I have to come to class. Because if I do, that means I have to drive to my mother's house, and that's an hour or so out of my way, drop my daughter off, and then come all the way into the campus. And then, of course, after class, I'm going to have to drive another hour out of my way. So I'm just wondering if I can't get the notes from one of my classmates. And I said, no, absolutely, you've got to come to class. And so with a heavy sigh, she hung up. And of course, she did come to class. But after she hung up, I thought, wow, she's coming all this way just for my class. So I thought, it better be worth it. I have to make that time worth it. I have to make it student-centered. I have to make it about her and about her classmates. And I have to make it worth her while. And I never looked back. I tell this story because I want to clarify what it means to be student-centered, and I want to clarify the notion of active learning. So in my experience as an educator, to be student-centered means that the students are the focal point of the classroom. They drive the class with their questions, they drive the class with their activities. The activities and the questions in the class are all driven by the curriculum. So if we're student-centered, this leads to an active learning situation where we're all interacting, we're all participating, the teacher is also an active participant in that classroom, and we're all pursuing that narrative that I'll talk about shortly. Let me explain how the model of a narrative of learning helps me create a student-centered classroom and helps me create active learning. So let me start with the learning part of the narrative of learning. Our learning, or our knowledge, is what we know about our discipline or our subject. So my learning, my knowledge about my subject comes from my experience of working within that discipline, working with my subject, and it comes from all of my knowledge and all of my understanding of the concepts related to that work. But that's not enough. We also need to be able to put all of our learning into the context of our students' curriculum. So all of my knowledge, all of my learning, all of my ability is focused around the curriculum and the learning objectives of that curriculum for my students. And so, if all of my learning and all of my understanding does not directly relate to the curriculum and to the learning objectives of my students, and the moment it doesn't, my students are going to stop and say, What are we doing? Why are we doing this? And so I better have an answer for them. I better have an understanding. Why are we doing this? So that's the learning part of the narrative of learning. So of course, a narrative is a story or a process or a way of action and interaction between people. So I need to consider how best to create the conditions that will allow all of us, me and the students, to work through the objectives of our curriculum. So I'm going to gather all of my learning, all of my knowledge. I'm going to determine how best to convey my learning to my students. What medium will I use, or what media will I use? I need to share the best readings. I need to create the best questions for those readings so the students know what to find and get out of those readings. And I need to create the best activities for my students to engage with that knowledge, with that content. And of course, medium also includes activities and interactions between students. So I'm going to also direct them to a discussion board where they'll take the answers and the concepts that they've learned and they're going to share them with each other. And so all of this is going to happen before the class even begins. Remember, we haven't even had our class yet. So then on the day, all of those students are going to come to class already having engaged with that content. They're going to have their own narratives of learning now around that content. So when they all get to class together, we're going to have a real student-centered classroom where they're driving the activities because they're already informed And then when they're there together, they're going to engage with each other. They're going to engage in activities that are directly related to the curriculum. So that student-centered focus will then allow us to have that active learning classroom from beginning to the end of the class. And so as you'll see, it matters who the teacher is in creating that student-centered classroom, which will allow us to have a really engaged, active learning experience.